to Southeast Alaska. This corner of our largest state is a scenic combination of ocean, islands, and mountains. It's contained in an area 525 miles long and 120 miles wide. It's a land of soft subtleties, like gentle mists clinging to quiet trees and wrapping around muted mountains. It's also a land of blunt power. Hello, I'm Scott Foster. Welcome to the Glaciers of Southeast Alaska. This is the Mendenhall near Juneau, one of approximately 100,000 Alaska glaciers. The Mendenhall and every other glacier is formed when the amount of snow that falls is greater than the amount of snow that melts. Each year in the mountains behind the Mendenhall, approximately 100 feet of snow fall. Eventually, the weight of this accumulation of snow is enough to change the snow crystals to ice, and then that same weight pushes the ice down the valley. We see the end result of that long process in the form of glaciers, like the Mendenhall. Today, about 10% of the Earth is covered with ice. About 2 million years ago, when there was a general cooling of the Earth, the Great Ice Age began and covered 30% of the Earth. During the Great Ice Age, large sheets of ice advanced and during short warming trends retreated. This precession and recession of ice continued until about 10,000 years ago. About 50% of Alaska was covered with glaciers during the Great Ice Age. Although the northern part of the state is colder, there were fewer glaciers because there was considerably less moisture to form snow. Most of the Ice Age glaciers were along coastal Alaska. So much of the Earth's water was frozen in glaciers that sea levels dropped, enough so that a land bridge connected Alaska and Siberia. It's thought that North and South America was populated by peoples, probably hunters following animals, moving across this bridge, probably 30,000 to 14,000 years ago. About 10,000 years ago, there was a general worldwide warming, and the great ice sheets retreated. Glaciers in Southeast shrunk back to their present size or even smaller. Then about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, there was another, but smaller, glacial advance called the Little Ice Age. Today's Southeast glaciers are the remnants of this last advance, and they're the ones that carved and polished the Southeast landscape we now see. Today in Southeast, there are 3 major ice fields. One is the 1,500 square mile Juneau Icefield. Another is the slightly smaller Stikine Icefield near Wrangell and Petersburg. And the third is the Brady Icefield and the great tidewater glacial system in Glacier Bay National Park. Each of these ice fields have spawned individual glaciers that have achieved star status, like the Mendenhall Glacier, easily accessible by highway from the state capital in Juneau, like the LeConte, the southernmost tidewater glacier in North America, and like the numerous tidewater glaciers in the one spectacular geographic setting of Glacier Bay. Park headquarters is located at the head of Glacier Bay, where solid ice 4,000 feet thick stopped just a while before the American Revolution. Since then, the ice has retreated, creating separate glaciers attracting thousands from around the world each year. The Muir Glacier, named for naturalist John Muir, has retreated about 50 miles since the mid-1700s, and today is the highlight for visitors to Muir Inlet on the east arm of the bay. On the west arm, visitors travel 65 miles one way and frequently get a chance to walk on shore at L'Amplou Glacier, cruise by the frequently ice-filled Johns Hopkins Glacier, and stop in front of the active face of Margerie Glacier.
Margerie Glacier starts approximately 15 miles up to the left up that valley on the slopes of Mount Quincy Adams. And in 500 years, the snows that fell when Christopher Columbus was sailing towards America have compressed, built up, and moved down to the point that today they're right at the face, waiting to calve off when we're in front.
Glacier Bay is very immense area, and it's very diverse. We're standing in Bartlett Cove, which is essentially an outwash plain with a glacier moraine, and it's relatively flat. Just 65 miles away is 15,000-foot mountains, and when you go up there, you get into fjords and steep-sided valleys that are totally void of vegetation. It's a very awesome place that, you know, brings you right back to the essence of life, as it were, in that there are the naked beginnings up around the glaciers where there's almost no life to lush rainforest at this end. And I think that spectrum really brings out, you know, the feelings of life forming, and you can see the processes that we read about in geology books actually happening here. Last year we had about 140,000 visitors. Most of them were on the ships. About 80% were on cruise ships and tour boats, the larger vessels. The rest came, stayed at the lodge, or were backpacking and camping in the park.
For those kayaking, backpacking, or tour boating, the trip begins at Bartlett Cove. That's the location of the park headquarters and the lodge. In line with efforts to keep Glacier Bay a wilderness park, the lodge is almost invisible from the water. It does offer normal services for visitors, including a dining room, a large fireplace lounge area, a bar, and rooms for the nightly interpretive slide shows put on by park rangers. Rooms in 55 units are separated from the main lodge and connected by boardwalks. Nearby campgrounds are available for those with their own gear. Charter boats are available for those wanting to fish. Kayak rentals may be arranged. And 2 tour boats leave the lodge each day for visits to different areas and glaciers in the park.
This is a place that in August, when the ice is melted, if the tides and the winds treat you right, you can go to the face of the glacier. It's a place that happens so rarely that even the naturalists that come up the bay all summer long, year after year, will be at the face of Johns Hopkins maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Glaciers in Southeast and Glacier Bay are what remain of the last major ice advance, called the Little Ice Age, that began about 4,000 years ago and then started retreating about 1750. That's about the same time Vitus Bering sailed to Alaska. When George Vancouver sailed by in 1794, Glacier Bay was filled with a glacier 100 miles long, 20 miles wide, and 4,000 feet thick. When naturalist John Muir visited 85 years later, the glaciers had retreated 48 miles. More scientists followed, adding to the fame of the area, helping establish it as a national monument in 1925, and providing records documenting the rapid glacial retreat.
The attraction to Glacier Bay initially is the glaciers, the tidewater glaciers. There are, depending on the year and the tidal movement, there's up to 17 tidewater glaciers in the park, and they're the primary attraction for people outside the bay. Once they get here, they learn of other aspects, the rapid retreat of the glaciers and the reforestation of the area, the marine wildlife and the terrestrial wildlife. One of the biggest special qualities is related to the glacial retreat. 200 years ago, the spot that we're standing in was under several hundred feet of ice, and the ice has retreated very rapidly back 65 miles. And this has produced a new virgin earth that is being reforested. It stands out very much when you leave Bartlett Cove and head up to the glaciers. The spruce trees start getting shorter. The numbers of trees is dispersed pretty dramatically down to no spruce trees at all. Alders take over at some point as you go up bay, and eventually down just to driest mat and then bare soil when you get up close to the tidewater glaciers.
More than 200 species of birds have been recorded within the park. They and other animals have returned as food becomes available, just as the plants have done following the retreat of the glaciers. Park rules prohibit people from walking on some of the barren rocks used by the birds for nesting, but boats are allowed close enough to offer good views. Other areas are simply too steep to see the birds other than from a boat's deck. Humpback whales are the most acrobatic of their species. A number make annual visits to Glacier Bay because of the food. In the process, they provide another of the park's attractions.
There's been over 300 whales identified in southeast Alaska. While the whale biologist working here also has just finished his PhD from the University of Hawaii, and he's identified many of those same whales in Hawaiian waters. In addition to humpback whales, we have minke whales occur here. They're a smaller whale, but similar type feeding mechanisms that humpbacks use. And also killer whales or orcas come into the park to feed, and they usually come in pods or groups of animals. In addition, there's a lot of harbor seals. In fact, harbor seals come here and breed on the icebergs that break off from the calving glaciers. And we have some areas where as many as 2,000 harbor seals will be in the vicinity of these glaciers and having their pups there. The harbor seals need a place they can go where they're not threatened by predation from wolves, other animals.
Bears, just one of a variety of land mammals working their way back into the park, are likely to be seen moving along shorelines. Mountain goats live on higher slopes. Harder to see are wolves, moose, and smaller animals. Visitors to Glacier Bay National Park expecting only glaciers will find surprises, like the fascinating spectacle of plant succession, marine and land animals, and a pleasant surprise for southeasterners used to fighting through thick underbrush, open country for easy hiking. The number of people using Glacier Bay is increasing. In 1970, 4 cruise ships entered the park. Now it's up to nearly 150. Private vessel use is also increasing, as are the number of kayakers and hikers. And although boat permits are needed, Superintendent Tollefson says permits for private boats are not hard to get. But as more people visit Glacier Bay, it becomes more difficult to retain the wilderness aspects of this national park.
It's a very wild and remote park, and people come to enjoy that, whether they're on a cruise ship and enjoying it passively or kayaking up one of the arms and hoping not to encounter anyone else other than your own group. So there's an interesting dichotomy of uses, but important to maintain the wilderness characteristic of Glacier Bay.
Hidden just out of sight behind Juneau's steep mountains, an ice field larger than the state of Rhode Island gives birth to 36 valley glaciers. A few are advancing, like the Taku, located south of Juneau on Taku Inlet. About 200 years ago, it formed an ice dam by advancing across Taku Inlet, and it may do so again. Tongass Glacier hangs high in the valley between downtown Juneau and the airport. It's retreated more than 1.5 miles in the last 250 years. Despite the 35 other glaciers flowing off the Juneau Icefield, the Mendenhall is the one most people see. This 12-mile-long glacier is among the most accessible and the most visited glacier anywhere. It's just 13 miles from downtown Juneau to the Forest Service Visitor Center and the glacier. In the 1940s, the ice in fact covered the rocks where the Visitor Center now sits. Today, the glacier face is a half-mile away. Sometimes it's hard to realize the face rises 200 feet above the water and 100 feet below, and it's 1.5 miles across. Most of the glaciers in the Juneau Icefield are retreating. The Mendenhall, on the average, loses about 30 feet a year. Each year, some 150,000 visitors come to the Mendenhall. Most see the glacier from the Visitor Center, but some get a different perspective and a closer feel. The Mendenhall Glacier is one of southeast Alaska's magnificent natural wonders. Formed some 3,000 years ago during the Little Ice Age, this river of ice has been attracting tourists since the late 1800s, when naturalist John Muir visited the Auk Glacier, as it was then known. In the past, only experienced mountaineers could make the climb to the top of the glacier to experience the quiet vastness that only occasionally is interrupted by the thunderous sounds of shifting ice. But now a new sound is heard on the ice field. The whirl of helicopters whisking eager tourists to the top of the Mendenhall or other Juneau glaciers for an unforgettable close-up look at one of nature's awesome creations.
We start off at the Temsco pad with a general briefing of the helicopter, and we supply boots and raincoats when they're needed. And we leave from the Temsco pad and go through generally around the valley area up to the Mendenhall Lake and up the west side of the glacier, covering the lower ice falls, which are pretty spectacular. And then we work our way on up the west side of the glacier, all the way up, pointing out the different ice falls and the way the ice flows in different directions, all the way up to behind the Mendenhall towers. And if the weather permits, we're able to get high enough to actually show the vastness of the ice field, the whole ice field. And when we get up behind the towers, we're able to point out some of the more massive formations of rock that we have up here, where 3,000 feet of sheer rock looks more like 500 or 600 feet. And really makes people feel very small in relation to the whole area. And we usually circle around the back side of the towers and then come back down the east side of the glacier to the Suicide Icefall Basin, where we land and let people out to walk around and take pictures of themselves in the ice for about 15 or 20 minutes, and depending on the weather again. And then we take off from here and go back down and pretty much go along the Thunder Ridge area of the valley back to the Temsco pad. And the total tour takes about 45 to 50 minutes.
Upon disembarking from the helicopters, visitors are eager to explore the potholed, crevasse-lined surface of the glacier.
Okay. Bill, come down.
Hey, Bill! Hey, Bill! As long as you don't go any further down.
All right, that's great. On three. 1, 2.
Yay, thank you. I'll take one of you.
Oh, you need to get a rock.
Oh, yeah, that's too small for me. Hey, that's a long way down there, honey.
I kept thinking about the glacier.
Give me a bite. That's like a pie.
Look how deep that is.
I know, and it's a slide down there, too. Oh, isn't that fantastic? It looks like a vein of a leaf.
Yeah, look at this one. Oh,
Albert, honey. Honey, come here and take a picture of this.
take a picture of this ice.
I wanted to take a picture of it because it's so unusual.
I swear, I've never seen anything like this in my life.
God really knew what he was doing, huh?
Look at this hole.
Yes, but come here, look at this. There's a waterfall.
It looks like rock candy.
It does. Be careful. If you fell head first down there, we'll be able to get you out.
Look at you, man.
During their explorations, the tourists are accompanied by experienced mountain guides who steer them away from possible hazards and answer their many questions.
Well, people, as soon as they land on the ice, of course, they want to take pictures right away, but they always ask how deep the ice is, why is it so blue, are there any wildlife, are there any wild animals up here? And of course, there's nothing living on the ice, but people expect to see fish in the holes, in the water. They expect to see woolly mammoths. You know, this is where they find the fossils of woolly mammoths. Everybody always asks about the forms of the ice. You know, wasn't this made by a tractor? Do people drive their snowmobiles up here and make these tracks across the way? They want to know, well, this is for instance, the medial moraine out here, they always think it's a highway. They say, oh, didn't someone build that out there? And you get some really wild questions, like, did they paint the ice? You know, did they color it blue? Do you find woolly mammoths up here? People, they just don't know anything about it, and they ask all kinds of questions. It's kind of fun.
The Juneau Icefield is the 5th largest in North America. It's also one of the most studied in the world. By studying this ice field, researchers are able to better understand worldwide climatic trends. One conclusion of the Juneau Icefield research is that a worldwide cooling trend is now underway. This could lead to another small ice age in 200 to 900 years and another major ice age in the next 10,000 to 30,000 years unless there are new worldwide climatic controls. The combustion of fossil fuels releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere could be one. Another might be the massive deforestation taking place in the tropics. They could create the greenhouse effect of raising the Earth's temperature. A warmer climate could mean fewer glaciers, higher sea levels threatening coastal cities, and the creation of new deserts. Research into glaciers provides this and other kinds of information. It continues all the time and is usually done by university teams, but not always. For example, near Petersburg sits the southernmost tidewater glacier in North America. The eyes and hands involved in studying this glacier belong not to college students, but to those still in high school.
I believe we're the only high school in the United States that's actually measuring the glacier.
LeConte, since we started to measure in 1983, has advanced from our position, our survey position, 230 feet. So LeConte is definitely advancing, and we'll have to plot out our data, the students will, and we'll know if it's continue that advance here in a couple of weeks.
I have to find the prominent points because we have to make at least 20 shots, or as many as we can, going across the front of a glacier, and trying to find the obvious shots that we can remember, and that they will know, you know, what we're shooting at. We have to plan for some shots that we make. The ice, you know, may not be there a half hour later. That's why we have to take as many as we do.
We'll be able to see that same point from the other side at the water's edge. So just read horizontal and vertical.
88 degrees, 52 minutes, and 12 seconds. Horizontal. And for vertical, 93 degrees, 37 minutes.
After collecting survey data from both sides of the ice-filled fjord, students used trigonometric calculations to determine the position of the glacier's face. Their data, shared with different scientific organizations around the world, showed the LeConte Glacier is slowly advancing. Living close to this scenic glacier has given these Petersburg High School students a unique opportunity for scientific research. Other kinds of research take place near other Southeast Alaska glaciers. In Glacier Bay, more than 50 miles of glacial retreat has opened a bay that is now the summer home for humpback whales. Because the glaciers attract so many people, there's been concern the large number of boats carrying them may be affecting the whale's habitat. Scott Baker spends most of each summer on a small boat studying the humpback whale in Glacier Bay.
I think that the work here in the park, both Duraz's during the 70s and our own during the 80s, has been a broader scale, long-term study of a species that really very little is known about. By returning here each year and by identifying the animals over and over, observing their behavior, their social affiliations, particularly their reproductive status, whether the females return with the years. I think we've built records of the animals really that are unparalleled, consistent sightings of animals over 13 and 14 years. We're learning a lot about their behavior that was unknown, kind of information that couldn't be gained from carcasses, which was the primary tool for the whaling biologist. The whales are endangered in part because of the direct action of mankind, humans, over the last century and even before. I think to a degree we have a responsibility to them. I mean, on one level of helping to ensure their recovery. At the same time, they're an important, in fact, possibly the most important part of a marine ecosystem, of a habitat that we really don't understand very well. In the North Pacific as well as in the South Pacific, they are probably the major feeders on on the marine invertebrates, the krill, and in some schooling fish. And by disrupting that over this century, by reducing their numbers to 5% or less, we really don't know what we've done to that ecosystem.
There are an estimated 300 to 400 humpback whales in Southeast. Approximately 40 return to the Glacier Bay area each summer from their wintering grounds in Hawaii. and each summer research continues to better understand this endangered species. It's not so hard for researchers to understand another aspect of southeast glaciers, the classic fjord country left behind after a glacial retreat. One such southeast fjord is the Tracy Arm Wilderness area, about 40 miles south of Juneau. In the early 1700s, this entire rocky passage was filled with ice, but since then, the ice has retreated more than 20 miles. Left behind are spectacular rock walls rising from water in many places more than 1,000 feet deep. The mind easily imagines this narrow fjord filled with ice. But then, rounding the last fjord corner, the mind sees the reality of the tidewater glacier still active and still blocking further passage. Another kind of glacierscape is visible near Ketchikan and Misty Fjords National Monument. Here, the glaciers retreated from the water's edge long ago and now are found only in the high mountains. What they left behind were the sculpted rock faces, the peaks rounded off by long-ago glaciers passing over the top, and high mountain lakes.
The major attraction is the fjords that were created by the glacial age, the most recent glacial age, some 7,000 years ago. And what it left is a textbook picture of geology, especially glacier geology. It's intimidating because it's so big and you know, a person feels so insignificant in it.
The insignificant feeling one may experience in Misty Fjords due to the vastness of the surroundings is a peaceful one. Peaceful as anything but the feeling residents of another part of Southeast have had about a glacier near them. Hubbard Glacier near Yakutat caused national news when it advanced so fast and far that it blocked the drainage of Russell Fjord. The ice dam created a rising lake that threatened to spill its banks and flood into the Seatuck River with devastating effect to the residents of Yakutat. It would destroy rich salmon spawning grounds, which are an important source of local food and an important boost to the local economy through visiting sports fishermen. This was a southeast glacier attracting attention not because of its scenic value, but because of its destructive power. The Hubbard Glacier finally broke, allowing the lake to drain and eliminate the immediate threat of flooding. Its dangerous and continuing advance, however, is just part of the natural life of glaciers and a force stronger than we are able to control. In the short time most of us spend watching glaciers, we seldom see their destructive power. Instead, we see a unique attraction that's the highlight of an Alaska visit. And while glaciers cover only 3% of Alaska's land, they surely produce a much higher percentage of Alaska's scenic beauty. The mighty Mendenhall Glacier comes grinding down from the mountains behind Juneau. This silent giant is Southeast Alaska's most popular scenic attraction. The Mendenhall is a dynamic glacier, actively quarrying bedrock, building moraines, and shaping the valley, a process it has repeated many times over the past centuries. This glacier originates at an elevation of 4,500 feet in the Juneau Icefield. Ice created there moves a few feet a day on its 12-mile journey down valley. It takes about 80 years for the ice formed at the head of the Mendenhall to finally reach its terminus at Menden-hall Lake. And at that point, the face stretches for 1.5 miles across the Menden-hall Valley. In some places, the ice at the face extends 100 feet below the water surface and rises 200 feet above. That's equivalent to the height of a 30-story building. As singularly spectacular as is the Mendenhall, it is in fact only one of 38 glaciers flowing from the Juneau Icefield. This 1,500 square mile ice field stretches from Taku Inlet south of Juneau all the way to Skagway in the north, and contains more than 50% of the glaciers in southeast Alaska's Coast Range mountains. Yet these southeast glaciers are only 5% of the glaciers in all of Alaska. For millions of years, the Earth has gone through cycles of ice ages and warming trends. The most recent was the Great Ice Age that began about 2 million years ago, covered 1/3 of the Earth's surface, and ended about 20,000 years ago with another warming trend. The Mendenhall and other southeast glaciers are remnants not of the Great Ice Age, but rather of a much more recent glacial advance called the Little Ice Age that occurred about 3,000 years ago. Today, the Juneau Icefield continues to produce glaciers because of the unique geography and climate of southeast Alaska. One key geographic ingredient is the Coast Range Mountains running along the southeast Alaska-Canada border. As the prevailing warm, water-filled air from the nearby Pacific Ocean strikes these colder mountains, moisture is released, usually in the form of snow at higher elevations. About 100 feet falls on the Juneau Icefield every year, and that resupplies the entire glacial system. The Mendenhall and most of the glaciers formed in the Juneau Icefield are retreating. But some glaciers, because of their location on the icefield, receive enough additional snowfall to cause them to advance. One of those is the Taku Glacier, just south of Juneau, which is currently advancing 500 feet a year. The fact is, only minor changes in temperature or precipitation are necessary to change retreating glaciers into advancing ones. The magnificent Mendenhall Glacier Recreation Area is managed by the U.S. Forest Service, and it's only one part of the larger Tongass National Forest, covering almost all of southeast Alaska. In addition to the Mendenhall's scenic and recreational attractions, it also has important scientific attractions. And the man who has led the study of the Juneau Icefield since 1948 is Dr. Maynard Miller of the University of Idaho. Each summer, Miller takes groups of university students onto the icefield for a season of research. Using a variety of techniques, including radiocarbon dating, historical photos, early charts, annual measurement, and more, Miller and the Juneau Icefield Research Program have developed a unique record of this icefield's actions dating back to the 1400s. And their research suggests another small ice age may occur within 200 to 900 years. And a major ice age may occur in the next 10,000 to 30,000 years unless a new set of worldwide climate controls come into play. One of these new factors could be a trend toward global warming called the greenhouse effect. Miller's experienced research team studies the Mendenhall in detail, but it's also possible for first-time visitors to study the Mendenhall in general and in the process learn to recognize the powerful forces of ice that have helped shape the southeast Alaska landscape we see today. And it's easiest to understand glaciers by beginning at their beginning. Cirques are the birthplace of glaciers and serve as snow collectors. Eventually, the weight of the accumulated snow exerts enough pressure to change snow crystals to ice crystals. When the accumulation becomes bigger than the cirque, it overflows. Some, like the Mendenhall, are called valley glaciers because they flow a ways and then end. Others, called tidewater glaciers, extend all the way to the sea. Popular examples near Juneau include the glaciers in Tracy Arm and Glacier Bay. As any glacier moves down valley, it encounters peaks called nunataks sticking through the ice. Crevasses are formed when the moving sheet of ice is forced to bend around nunataks or move over uneven ground. Although crevasses don't go all the way to the bottom of the glacier, they do reach depths of 150 feet on the Mendenhall. As glaciers move, they quarry and gather rocks that gouge and polish the bedrock. The results may be seen as striations or scratches left on the rocks. Many are visible on the rocks near the visitor center. Glaciers advance if the melting at the face is less than the glacier's forward flow. Glaciers retreat if the melting is greater than the forward flow. That's presently the case with the Mendenhall. The distinctive blue-colored ice is the result of the specific crystal structure of the ice. Just as the crystal structure of a ruby reflects red, the crystal structure of ice reflects blue. When the dense ice cracks, allowing air to enter, all colors of light are refracted and the ice appears white. Because of all the melting ice, glaciers generate a tremendous amount of water carrying finely ground, silty rock particles called rock flour. It's these particles that give glacial rivers and lakes, like the Mendenhall, their cloudy color. The Mendenhall reached its maximum advance during the Little Ice Age and began to retreat about 250 years ago. That point of furthest advance is marked by a large dirt mound called the terminal moraine and is easily seen today about 2.5 miles from the present glacier face. In the 1930s, the Mendenhall still covered the rocks where the Forest Service Visitor Center now stands. Today, its face stands 1/2 mile away. If the Mendenhall kept retreating at its present rate of 30 feet a year, it would take 2,000 years to disappear. One of the unusual aspects of the Mendenhall is that it's located only 13 miles by 4-lane freeway from Alaska State Capitol. As a result, this glacier is very easy to visit, and each year more than 120,000 do just that. Many of the visitors are on cruise ship tours of the Inside Passage and take time while they're in Juneau to bus to the glacier and see for themselves this spectacular scene, and to learn for themselves something about these spectacular glaciers. But there's more to do at the Mendenhall Glacier and surrounding Forest Service recreation area than just look. A series of different trails offer visitors short interpretive walks or longer hikes to scenic vistas. And along the way, a panoramic picnic is certainly possible. Nearby Steep Creek offers several locations to watch salmon struggling upstream to spawn. The spawning salmon attract perching eagles, a common sight in trees along the stream. 4,000 feet above Steep Creek, mountain goats may be seen on the flanks of Bullard Mountain. Sometimes, those wanting different views of the glacier take flight-seeing trips over the ice field in small planes, or actually set down on the glacier during a helicopter tour. Those with the experience may rope up and venture out on the ice to climb. The use of the Mendenhall continues right through the winter season with sledding on hills near the lake and cross-country skiing out onto the lake when it freezes over. Regardless of the different views or different experiences one may have at the Mendenhall Glacier, some aspects of the experience remain the same. Impressive in power, eye-catching in beauty, accessible in location, the Mendenhall Glacier is a prime attraction and a dominating symbol of Southeast Alaska.